My name is Anna. I am 30 years old, and I live in a small town near the coast called Windermere. It's quiet here, and most people know each other by name. I live alone in a one-bedroom flat above a bakery. Every morning, I wake up to the smell of fresh bread. I work in a bookstore across the street, and my days are mostly the same. Open the shop at 9. Greet the regular customers. Organize the books. Close at 6. Then walk home, cook something simple, and read until I fall asleep. Life has been like this for a few years. Safe, predictable, a little empty, but I've made peace with that. I don't have many friends, and I rarely go out unless it's for groceries or a walk along the beach. Some people might think it's a boring life, but after everything that happened before, I prefer it this way. Quiet means no surprises, no pain. One morning, I was shelving a new delivery of books when I noticed someone standing outside the window. He was looking at the display of novels, head slightly tilted, hands in the pockets of his gray coat. Something about his face made me pause. There was something familiar in the way he stood, in the shape of his eyes, but I couldn't place it. He didn't come in. He stayed there for a minute or two, then walked away. I didn't think much about it. People stopped by the window all the time. But the next day, he came again. Same coat. Same quiet stare through the glass. This time, he looked up and met my eyes. For a moment, it felt like time paused. I smiled politely and went back to my work. When I looked again, he was gone. The third day, he came inside. He didn't say much. He walked around the shop, touched a few books, then picked up a copy of an old poetry collection and brought it to the counter. His voice was calm when he said thank you. That was it. But his eyes stayed on me for a second too long. As he walked out, I felt something strange in my chest. A feeling I hadn't felt in years. Not fear exactly. More like a quiet question forming inside me. The next day he returned. He bought another book. And then the day after that, always around the same time, just before lunch, always choosing something simple. He never spoke more than a few words, but his eyes always searched mine like he was waiting for something. I began to wonder if he recognized me too. One afternoon, as I was dusting the shelves, I stopped and stared out the window. What if I did know him? What if he was someone from my past? Someone I had forgotten, or someone I had tried not to remember? The idea stayed with me all day. When I closed the shop and walked home, my mind was full of old faces, schoolmates, neighbors, old friends, and then, for a brief second, I saw him. Not the man in the shop, but a memory of someone else. A boy. A boy with dark hair and quiet eyes who used to sit next to me in history class. My heart skipped a beat. Could it be him? I tried to push the thought away. People change. Faces change. Memories are tricky. But the next morning when I opened the shop, he was already waiting outside. This time, He smiled. A full, soft smile that reached his eyes. I opened the door and nodded. He came in and walked to the shelf where we kept the older novels. He didn't pick up a book this time. He turned to me and said, "Do you remember me?" My stomach dropped. I felt cold and warm at the same time. My mouth opened, but no words came out. He gave me time. After a long pause, I whispered, "Michael?" He nodded slowly. "It's been a long time, Anna." It had been 13 years. The last time I saw him, we were 17. He moved away with his mother after his parents separated. I remembered the day he left. He didn't say goodbye. I waited at the bus stop that morning, hoping he would come. He never did. I didn't cry, but I carried that silence for years. We sat in the corner of the shop, away from the window. I made tea from the small kettle we kept near the register. He looked older, of course, but his voice hadn't changed much. Still calm, still careful. He told me he had moved back to Windermere 6 weeks ago. He was working remotely now, something with software and design. His mother had passed away 2 years earlier. His father had moved to Spain. He came back to feel closer to where he once felt like himself. I listened. I didn't know what to say. Part of me felt joy, pure and bright. But another part felt unsure. Why now? Why come into the bookstore every day without saying anything until now? I asked him this, and he looked down at his hands. "I wasn't sure you'd want to see me. I left badly. I didn't say goodbye. I've regretted that for years." I stared at him. "You were my best friend. You just disappeared." "I know," he said softly. "I was scared. Everything was changing. My mother was sad all the time. I didn't know how to face it. And you, I was afraid saying goodbye would hurt more." There was silence between us. Not a cold one, a thoughtful one. He looked at the shelves behind me and smiled. "You always loved books. I'm glad you still do." That made me smile. A small one. The kind that comes slowly. He came back the next day, and the day after that. But now we talked. Sometimes just a few minutes. Sometimes more. He asked about my life, my work, my mother. I told him the truth. I told him I stopped expecting people to stay, that after he left, I never really let anyone in again. He listened without interrupting. His presence felt calm, like a steady rhythm. One rainy afternoon, I found him waiting outside with an umbrella. He opened it over me without asking and walked me across the street. We didn't say much, but the silence was different now. Comfortable. We started having lunch together once a week. Just simple meals in the bakery downstairs. We talked about old memories, about books, about music we used to love. It was like brushing dust off something precious I forgot I had. One day, he brought me a copy of a novel we both read in school. There was a note inside. in case you ever wonder what this place means to me. But I still wasn't sure. Was he here just to reconnect? Was this friendship? Was there something more? I didn't know how to ask, and I didn't want to ruin the quiet comfort we had found again. Then one day, he didn't come. Not in the morning, not at lunch, not in the evening. I tried not to let it bother me. Maybe he was busy. But when he didn't come the next day, my chest felt tight. On the third day, I walked to the cafe he sometimes worked from. He wasn't there. I walked home in the rain, my coat too thin for the weather, and my thoughts too loud to ignore. He came back on the fourth day. I was in the shop, pretending to read. He opened the door slowly and walked in, holding something in his hand. It was the same poetry book he had bought the first day. Inside was a small photo. It was of us, from school. I didn't even remember it being taken. "I found this in my things," he said. It reminded me of why I came back. I looked at him, and for the first time, I said what I was afraid to say. "Why did you come back, Michael?" He didn't look away. To see if it was still possible, if we could find each other again, in a new way. My hands felt cold, but my heart felt warm. And that's when I realized maybe people do return. Maybe not everyone leaves forever. Before I share the rest of my story, could you please tell me where you're from? It gives me strength to know there's someone out there who listens to me, who understands me. It means a lot to me. After that day in the bookshop, everything felt different. Michael came back almost every day. Sometimes he stayed for a short time. Other days, he stayed longer and helped me restock the shelves or move heavy boxes. It felt easy, almost natural. I had not felt this kind of connection in years. A part of me was still unsure, but I also started to enjoy his company. We began talking more, not just about books, but about life. I told him about Winmere and how quiet it had become. I told him about my routines, about how I spent most of my time alone. He listened. He didn't interrupt or try to fix things. He simply nodded and looked at me like I mattered. He talked about his job and his time living in London. He said city life had been fast and lonely. He said Winmere helped him breathe again. It was peaceful, and he liked the slower rhythm. I understood what he meant. I had always needed calm. It felt safe. One day after closing, he offered to walk me home. I said yes, even though I usually preferred walking alone. We didn't talk much during that walk. We listened to the sounds of the street and the distant waves. It felt quiet but warm. When we reached my door, he smiled and said, "Thanks for today." Then he left. That evening, I thought about how easy it felt to be near him. I didn't need to try. I didn't need to explain myself. I felt seen, maybe for the first time in a long time. But I also felt nervous. It was hard to let my guard down. I had been alone for so long. The next week, he invited me to a small cafe near the beach. We had lunch outside. The weather was cool, and the sky was light gray. He asked me about school, about things I used to love. I told him I used to draw, but I stopped years ago. He asked why. I said I didn't know. Maybe life got in the way. He looked at me and said, "You should start again." I smiled, but I didn't answer. That idea stayed with me all night. I found my old sketchbook under my bed. Most pages were empty, but a few had old drawings. I flipped through them slowly. I had forgotten how much I missed it. We continued meeting. Sometimes he brought coffee to the bookshop. Other times we walked along the beach. We talked about music, food, childhood memories. He asked me about my mother, and I told him she was doing better. I told him she still asked about him, even after all these years. One evening, he brought me a book. It was a story we used to love in school. Inside the front cover, he wrote, "For Anna, to remember where we started." My hands felt warm holding it. I didn't know what to say. I thanked him. That night I held the book to my chest before going to sleep. But even with all this, I still felt a little afraid. I didn't know where this was going. Was he just being kind? Did he want something more? I told myself to stay calm. I didn't want to expect too much. Then something happened that changed everything. It was a quiet Friday morning. I was opening the shop, placing new books on the table near the window. The door opened. I looked up and froze. A woman walked in. She was around my age, dressed well, with short brown hair and a confident smile. She looked around the shop, then walked up to me. "Hi," she said. "You must be Anna." I nodded, unsure of what to say. "I'm Emma," she said. "I'm a friend of Michael's." I smiled politely, but my heart was racing. "Oh," I said. "Nice to meet you." "I was in town," she said, "and he told me about this shop. Said I should visit." I nodded again, not trusting my voice. She didn't stay long. She looked around for a few minutes and bought a travel book. Then she said goodbye and walked out. I stood still for a while, holding the book she had touched. Something didn't feel right. That evening, Michael came by as usual. I didn't mention Emma. I wanted to, but I didn't know how. I told myself it was nothing, but inside, my thoughts were loud and confusing. The next day, he didn't come. I waited and waited, but he never arrived. My heart felt heavy. I told myself he was busy, but when he didn't come the next day either, I felt something colder. It was the same feeling I had felt years ago when people left without warning. I tried to stay calm. I focused on my work. I told myself not to care, but I couldn't help it. I kept thinking about that woman, about what she meant to him. Were they close? Was she more than a friend? On the fourth day, I saw him through the window. He was standing across the street. I opened the door, and he walked in slowly. He looked tired. "Hi," he said. "Can we talk?" I nodded and led him to the back of the shop, where it was quiet. "I'm sorry I disappeared," he said. "I didn't mean to worry you." I looked at him but said nothing. "I needed time to think," he added. I crossed my arms and waited. "I saw Emma," I said finally. "She came here." He nodded. "I know. She told me." "Who is she?" I asked. "We were together once," he said. "A long time ago. It didn't work out. We stayed friends. That's all." I watched his face. He looked honest. I wanted to believe him. "I didn't tell you because it didn't feel important," he said. "But maybe I should have." I took a deep breath. I need to know you're not going to leave again." He stepped closer. "I'm not leaving." We stood there for a long moment. Then I said, "Okay." After that, something between us felt stronger, more open. We talked more honestly. We didn't pretend everything was perfect. He told me about his mistakes. I told him about my fears. We learned how to sit with each other in silence and still feel connected. One Saturday, he invited me to meet his sister. We had lunch together in a small restaurant by the river. She was kind and warm. She smiled at me and said, "He talks about you all the time." Later I asked him, "What do you tell people about me?" He smiled. "I tell them you make the world feel quieter. In a good way." That made me laugh. "That's a strange thing to say." "Maybe," he said. "But it's true." Another evening, we sat on a bench near the water. I looked at him and said, "I used to think it was better not to feel anything. It felt safer." He didn't speak, just waited. "But now, I think I don't want to go back to that. I want to feel something again." He reached for my hand. "You don't have to go back. Not if you don't want to." I looked at the sea and nodded. The wind was soft and the stars were starting to appear. For the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't waiting for something to go wrong. I was simply there, with him. And that was enough. Things between Michael and me slowly became more real. It wasn't just talking in the shop or walking by the sea. We started sharing more parts of our lives. He helped me paint my kitchen one weekend. I helped him move furniture into his new flat. These small moments felt simple, but they meant everything to me. One day, we went to a small market outside town. We bought fresh bread, fruit, and flowers. I remember thinking that it all felt so normal. But for me, normal was new. I hadn't shared days like that with anyone in years. He reached for my hand as we walked. I didn't pull away. I held on. In the past, I used to keep a distance. Even when people were kind, I was careful. I didn't want to get too close. But with Michael, it was different. He didn't ask for more than I could give. He didn't try to fix me. He just stayed. He made space for me to breathe, to grow, and to feel safe again. One evening, we went to my mother's house for dinner. She was quiet at first, watching him closely, but after a while, she relaxed. She asked about his work and where he had been all these years. He answered everything with calm and honesty. After he left, she said, "He's kind. I see why you like him." Her words made me smile. I did like him, more than I wanted to admit at first. He made life feel lighter, like I didn't have to carry everything alone anymore. But I was still afraid to use the word love. That word felt too big, too final. A few days later, something unexpected happened. I was cleaning the shop when an old customer came in. She was in her 60s, always friendly. But this time, her smile faded when she looked at me. "Is Michael your boyfriend?" she asked suddenly. I paused. "We're close," I said carefully. "Why?" She looked uncomfortable. "I heard he used to live here years ago, but not everything people say is kind." I felt my stomach turn. "What do you mean?" She looked around, then said, "Some say he left because of trouble. Something about a girl. I don't know the details." I didn't respond. I thanked her for coming and watched her leave. Her words stayed with me for the rest of the day. I didn't know if they were true, but I couldn't ignore them either. That evening, I waited for Michael to come. When he arrived, I offered him tea like usual, but I didn't sit down right away. "Can I ask you something?" I said. He nodded, noticing my tone. "Why did you leave Windermere all those years ago?" I asked. He looked surprised, but not angry. He took a breath before answering. "I left because my parents were falling apart," he said, "and because I felt lost. But yes, there was also someone, a girl I liked." I stayed silent, waiting. "We were close for a while," he continued. "But when I told her I was leaving, she got upset. Her family blamed me. People talked. It became too heavy and I didn't know how to deal with it." "Was it serious?" I asked. He shook his head. "We were young. It didn't last. But I didn't handle it well. I should have been more honest with her. I should have said goodbye properly. To her, to you, to everyone." His voice didn't shake. He wasn't trying to hide anything. That mattered more to me than a perfect story. "Thank you for telling me," I said. He reached for my hand. "I don't want to hide anything from you." That night, I thought about how much we had changed. Years ago, he ran from hard things. Now, he was staying. He was telling the truth, and I was listening. The next weekend, we went to a lake outside town. We sat on a blanket, watched the water, and ate sandwiches. It was quiet, and the air smelled like grass and warm earth. I looked at him and felt something shift inside me. "Michael," I said, "I think I was wrong before about people, about how they always leave." He looked at me gently. I thought it was safer not to care, I said. But now I know. Caring is what makes life feel real. He smiled. You don't have to say anything you're not ready for. I know, I said. But I want to. He waited. I love you, I said, clearly and calmly. His face softened, and he held my hand tighter. I love you too, he said. It didn't feel like a big moment in a movie. It felt quiet and warm, like the end of a long day. It felt right. After that, things didn't become perfect. We still had little fights. We still made mistakes. But now, we worked through them together. We didn't run. We didn't hide. We stayed. Months passed, and Michael became a part of my daily life. He helped at the shop when I needed him. I visited his flat on weekends. We made simple plans and enjoyed small things, a walk, a film, dinner with friends. My mother grew close to him too. One Sunday she told me, "You seem lighter now, like you're finally letting yourself be happy." I nodded. I was. One rainy afternoon, I found an old photo of us from school. We were both smiling, holding books, standing in front of the school library. I showed it to Michael. "You've always been part of my story," I said, "and you've always been part of mine." He replied. Sometimes I still think about the day he walked into the shop, how I didn't recognize him at first, how I felt something without understanding it. That moment changed my life. It opened a door I thought was closed forever. Now I believe people can return. I believe in second chances. Not everyone leaves. Some people find their way back. And sometimes that's when life truly begins. We don't always know when something important is starting. It can begin in silence, in a look, in a memory. And it can grow slowly until one day we see it clearly. He looked familiar, but now I know. He was more than familiar. He was part of who I was, and now part of who I am becoming. I hope you have enjoyed the story. Like and comment if you want to hear more soon.